Hello, welcome to this presentation about the Power Query language M. If you want to follow along, go to this URL and there you'll find the PowerPoint and the samples. Let's start with a question. Which of you is afraid of the advanced editor? Don't be shy. I know I was afraid at first. I entered the advanced editor and I thought it would break everything if I start typing N. And I did. I broke my queries. But after that I started learning about the language M and I noticed how many different scenarios that you can use M for, which were not available if you only use the user interface of Power Query. So this is also my goal for this session, to help you understand where you can use M and to not be afraid to use the advanced editor to create your custom columns, custom filtering, create your own table valued functions and use M like a pro. Who am I? My name is Arthur Graus. I'm a freelance Power BI specialist from Netherlands, hence my funny accent. And I live and breathe Power BI since the very first moment it came out as an add-in in Excel. Okay, let's get started. What does this mysterious letter M actually stands for? Has it to do with data massage? Not really. Is it because it's a data mashup engine? No. Or maybe it's because of the book of Chris Webb about the data monkeys. But nah, that's it neither. M stands for modeling. M is built as a modeling language, part of the Microsoft Oslo project, which was cancelled in 2010. And it's all about model-driven development, in the sense that with one model you can define the entities that you have in an application, and behind the scenes that's being translated into a database language like SQL or Oracle PSQL. And that's what it still is. It's a functional language like F#. It's not so much about model-driven development anymore, but it still is about translating a model to a database language. Essentially, it's one ATL language to rule them all. So if you know M, it can be translated in any database language that you want. So for example, with the user interface, you click a number of actions. So I get some data from SQL Server, I choose a table, I remove some columns, I filter some rows, I rename some columns, and this M code is being generated from that. But this M code itself is again being translated into the database language. So in this case I'm working with SQL Server. So it's being query folded, translated into TSQL. Would I have connected to Oracle, then this same language will be query folded into PLSQL, the language of Oracle. If I connect to web service, it's being translated into OData. If I connect to Excel or to another data source like CSV, then it's gonna do it itself. It's not gonna transform it to something. So the nice thing about this is that you have just one language to do all the transformations that you want, no matter which data source that you use. And it's particularly interesting if you have data sources like CSV or Excel sheets where there is no language that you can use. So that's the power of M. But unfortunately, M doesn't get that much love. Most people, like you probably, are in love with DAX, love to do a lot of things with DAX, but are not so familiar with M. And that's a shame, because with M you can do lots of nice things. Let's see what kind of scenarios that I use it for. For example, custom columns. Of course you have the custom column button in the ribbon. But if you want to do more complex calculations, then you need to know the M functions. Dynamic filters, that's where you also can use M. Parameters, maybe you want to parameterize some things, like the number of years that you want to import, or the number of rows that you want to import, or which data source that you want to use. If you want to connect to a development environment or a test environment, that's what you can handle with parameters. But you can also sort and group by using M. For example, what if I want to have the last order per customer? That's not something that you can choose in the user interface. For that, we need M. but also making functions that return one value or return a lot of values. And with this you can make like parameterized filters, where you specify a parameter, the function filters the set, and it returns a table that's being filtered. You can also do cross joins and error handling. In the demos, I want to show you the first 7 parts, and the error handling is for another presentation. Let's take a look at the custom column scenario, because that's something I use it for a lot. Of course, you can use the custom column button in the ribbon, and there's also a column from examples, a magic button that can do it for you. Really interesting. But say I choose this one. Here I have some periods, like January 1995, February, March, and I could just enter here a date. I want to get a date from the period, and everything works fine. But if you look here, I have a year. This is not a month but a year, and here it breaks. I just wanted to return null here. It needs to be empty. So what I can do here, I can enter null, but then everything breaks. So this is a scenario where you can use M code for, and that's what I want to show you. How do you come to M? The first thing that I mostly do for a custom column, I just create a column with some columns that I need as input. And then I go over to the advanced editor, and in the advanced editor, that's where you can enter the M code. And it looks something like this. So you get this for free, table.add column with the column name, and then here you can enter the M code. Now I want to take a look at the data types. Which data types do you have if you use M? For that I go over to the advanced editor. There are 2 sorts of data types. You have primitive ones, the simple ones, like text, number, and you have the more complex ones, like records and lists and objects and tables. Let's start with the simple ones. Of course, we have the text variables, like we saw before. I can assign a first name, a last name. I can concatenate them in a full name variable. You can also see you can have multiple variables on one line. It doesn't matter. That's why you need the comma to separate them. There are also number variable types, like a whole number or decimal numbers. And if you want to calculate with them, it's as easy as in Excel. You can plus, minus, multiply and divide. Nothing fancy here. Then let's take a look at the logical expressions, the if-else constructions. That's a little bit different than, for example, DAX or Excel. This is more like in a programming language, where you have an if statement and an else if, and at the end we have the else. So for example here, if somebody is not married and he doesn't work full-time, then we're gonna assign him 100% happiness index score. And if he has enough money for hobbies and not too much kids, then he should also be okay. But if he doesn't have a lot of money and he have a lot of kids, yeah, then basically he's screwed. So here you see how you can set up an if, else if construction. You don't need any square brackets or round brackets or an and. This is the syntax. Another thing I want to point out, if you want to work with text and you want to have like carriage return line feeds inside the text, then you can use these codes. So the #cr #lf carriage return line feed, and it will look like this. So in this case it's spread out across 3 lines. One of the most interesting data types is the datetime data type. So let's take a look at that. It's broken, so let's fix it. So the first thing I want to do is to get the day of today. Unfortunately, there is in M no such thing as today. The only thing we can get is now. So the date and the time of the current moment. All the functions in M are inside the name of the function. So you always start with the name of the type. So for example, datetime or date or text. So first you start with the name of the type, and then you can choose all the functions that you need. And you see there are a lot of functions concerning datetime. And if I want to know what the datetime now is, I can use the local now. And these things I want to strip out. What you can do to put things into comments, I can use it like this. A slash star and a star slash, just like in SQL Server. Now it's commented out. But also I need to get rid of this comma. Now the variable has the local now, and now I want to return it, and I want to do this with a record. A record in other programming languages, this is called an object. And the object has properties, and these properties you can define them here. It's just like a JSON, if you know what it is, or XML. So here I can define the name of the thing, for example now, and then equals, and then I can assign a variable, like for now. Everything looks good, done. And now I should see the local date and time. Okay. Let's mess around a little bit with this. For example, now I really want to have today. So I want to have today here. So what I can do is I can go to the date data type. Dot. Here you see all the operations that you can do with the date, like add days or months or quarters. But there's also a from. All data types have a from. That's meant for casting, to get something in and put it into the form of a date. And here I can specify for now. And now basically I want to convert the date time into date. And this for today. I can put it here in the record. And now it's going to add the extra property today. Okay, let's continue. Now I want to have yesterday. So what can you do for that? I can do date dot. I can add some dates. First I have to specify a date time, and then I have to specify the number of days. So if I do, for example, for today, comma, -1, and here I can put in yesterday. Okay. Now subtract 1. Now, for example, I want to have the start of the year or the start of the month. There are some very interesting functions in the M to get the first of the month or the first of the year or the first of the quarter. So, for example, I can take here date dot start of year. I can just put in the variable, for example, for today. And now it should give me at the start of the current year. You get the first, and for the same applies to the quarter, to the week, to the month. There are a lot of functions for date times. I think M is the language that I know of with the most date time functions that I've ever seen. Way more than SQL Server or C# or JavaScript or whatever language I've seen in the past. And it's a shame that you don't use all these functions if you just use the user interface. Only if you go to the M code you can use all these functions. So that's why I want you to learn M. Let's take, for example, a birth date. Say I want to calculate an age calculation. I want to do age calculation. So I have a specific birth date and I want to enter the birth date. What you can do, there are also a lot of hash functions. These are, I don't know, they're not really hidden functions, but you cannot find them in IntelliSense. They all start with the hash, and these are more or less constructor functions. They can construct objects, in this case a date object, and I can pass in a year, 1974. I can pass in a month, and the second one. You don't have an IntelliSense, I don't know exactly why, but it still works. And this for birth date, I want to return it in the records to show you that it works. Then, okay, there we have it. The next thing I want to show you is how you can subtract two dates from each other. So I want to calculate the age, for example. So I have here my today, I have my birth date. I want to see how many days or how many years is my age. Okay, let's take a look at the duration. What you can do is I can subtract two dates. So I can take, for example, for today. I can subtract for birth date. And what does it give me? This gives me a duration. That's a different data type, duration. And from a duration you can get all kind of information. And that's in the duration object. So I can get the days, the hours, the minutes, the seconds. In this case I want to have the days, for example, of the duration between these two dates. Like this. And then I get the duration. If I want to calculate the age, what I could do is I could divide this by 365.25. Then I get a rough approximation of the age. Mostly this is accurate enough. And if I take this one, age, okay, let me tell you a secret. This actually is my birth date, and I really particularly don't like being 46 already. So what I want to do is I want to round this number down. So that I'm just 45, because it's not the 2nd of September yet, at least now that I'm recording it. So for that I go to the advanced editor and I put here a number. So in the number type we have all kind of mathematical functions, like a round down. And now it looks a lot better. Nice. Move on to a real world scenario and see how we can use this M syntax and all the functions that we saw. Let's take this example. Here I have a column period with a month and a year, a population and a growth. I want to convert this column into a date. So 1995 should be the 1st of January 1995. Of course I can use the column from examples, but now I want to do it via a custom column with some M code. And there I want to make an exception for this row where there's not an M inside the column. I want to do something different. So I can use an if function, I can use some text functions, and I can manipulate dates. Let's see how it works. I'm going to create a custom column. I'm just going to insert the period column and I'm going to call this date. Okay. And now I'm going to the advanced editor, and in the advanced editor I'm gonna program my code, and it should be on this in this spot. So what do we see here? Table.add column. So it's gonna add a column to the table with the name date, and it's gonna execute for each row this code. So whatever I put in here, it's gonna execute for each row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the if function. I want to detect if the double M is inside the text. So I can use an if for that. And I want to do something with text. So I start with the data type text, and then I'm going to look for something. And if you want to search something, you can use the function contains. What is the text I'm going to look for? I'm going to look in the field period. And then in the second parameter, I'm going to add the substring that I'm going to look for. In this case, I'm going to look for the double M. And then I can do something, and else I can do something else. In this case, I want to return null. So if it doesn't contain the M's, then we are at the year level. I want to return a null. And here I need to return something. So the first thing I want to do is I want to return, for example, the year. So how do I get the year from this string? What does the string look like? I can put it here. It's always handy to have like an example in front of you. This is what it looked like. So I want to have the first four characters. So I can do this with text dot, I can take the start. In this case I want to get it from the period, and then I want to get the number of characters is 4, so now I should get the year. Let's take a look. And it will give me the year, and if it's at the year level it will return a null if it doesn't contain the double M. Okay, so now I want to also have the month part. Let's concatenate it for now to see if it works. So for that I can use the end function. So I can put text.end, and then I'm gonna take the period column again, and from there I'm gonna take the last 2 characters. Okay, and now I get an error. Okay, I did a spelling error here. So that's the downside of this. Why doesn't it have IntelliSense on the column names? That's something to improve on. Periods, okay. And now you see the year and the month. But now I need to turn it into a real proper date. Of course I could do it with all the nice functions, but I'm into the M right now, so I want to do it with M. So how can I construct a date? That's where you use the hash, the hidden hash function for hash date. And then I can pass in a year. So this is the year. But if I do it like this, I get an error. I'll show you what happens. Just for the sake of it. Then I want to have the month. That's this part. And then as the day, I can put in a 1. So I take the first of the month of the year. But this doesn't work. Now I get again an error, and it says I cannot convert the value text 1995 to number. So I need to convert the text to number. M is very strict about the types. You have to explicitly convert it every time. So what I can do here is I can put it into a number. So number dot, and you can use the from for that. The from is for the casting. So this is a little bit annoying, but yeah, that's how it works. Number.from, and then I do it like this. So I have a text, the first 4 characters, I put it into a number, that's the year part. I take the last 2 characters, that's the month, I put it into a number, that's the month part, and then I take the first. And now we have a proper date. The next thing I want to show you is how you can add custom filters using the power of M. In this case, I have here the population data from 1995 up till today. But say I'm not interested in all this data, I only want to have the last 10 years. Of course, what you can do, there's here the filter button. I can select date filters. I can select here in the previous. And I can say I want to have the previous 10 years. Okay, and now I get something like this. It's starting in 2010 and it's taking the data up till December 2019, but it's not taking the current year. Say I want also have the current year. Then there's not a function that you can use from the user interface, and that's why we need the M. So what I'm going to do is I take this filtered rows as a sample to work with. I go to the advanced editor. It's always easier to have like a head start. Now I see here the table.select rows, that's the filtering. And this is the each again. That's what they're going to evaluate for each row to see if it's true. This is like a condition. So let's make it a little bit bigger so you can see what happens here. So here it's using a M function, date.is in previous n years. In this case, it's taking the last 10 years. I want to do it differently. And for that, I need some variables. So the first thing I'm going to calculate is today. Now we know how to do that. I can have a variable today equals datetime dot UTC now. Now I have the time and the date. If I only want to have the date, then I can use date.from. and I can cast it in the date. Okay, so now I have today. Now I want from today to go 10 years back. So what I can do is make a variable 10 years back equals, and then we have the date type again, and I can choose add years. I want to start with the var today, and then I want to add minus 10 years. Okay. But that's not all, because then I'll end up somewhere in August 2010. I want always to start at the beginning of the year. So I want to have the beginning of 2010, not somewhere in between. So for that I can create a new variable. And here I can build up my own date using this hidden hash date function. You see, it's very handy to know these functions. And I pass in a year, a month, and a day. And I can take the year, so I can take date.year from the variable that I created 10 years back. I can do the same with the month. Oh, sorry. So I have the year, and now I just want to have the first of the first month. So, and that will give me the 1st of January of 2010 in this case. Now the only thing I need to do now is to check whether the date that I'm looking at is greater or equal to this date. So that's pretty easy. I can remove this part. And I can put in here, should be greater or equal to this variable. That's it. So here we have some variable declarations to do some calculations, and then you can use these in your select rows. Okay. And now it's going to start at the 1st of January 2010, and it's going to end in the current year, in this case in June. The next thing I want to show you is how you can use M when grouping data. For example, in this case I have the population per month, but now I want to have it per year. And of course you can do this via the user interface, I'll show you, but it doesn't quite work as you want it. I'm going to reference this query, I put it here. I want to have the yearly population. I want to extract the year from the date. Of course I could use the M code date.year, but why would it? I can also do it like this. I can take it from here, the year. And now I want to sort on the date column. I can do it via the sort button. And now I want to group on the year. So I click on the group by button. And now I can choose the year column to group on. And I want to use, I want to get the last population. So for December, for example. But the operation last doesn't exist in the user interface, unfortunately. So for now I'm just going to take the average. I want to have the average of the population, and I call this population. Okay. So now I get the average, but what you can do now is go to the advanced editor, and if you look over to the code, you see that's going to group on the year. And now for each year, it's going to take the average of the population. But what if I remove the average? And then you see there are a lot more options to choose from. And I can also have the last. So by simply changing average by last, I get exactly what I want. So now I get the population of December 2010. If you don't believe me, let's check it out. So it's 119 at the end. If we go over here, I have here the populations. If I look at December, it's 119. Okay, so now I created a monthly population and a yearly population. You would think my customer would be really happy now, but no, they always find something new that they want. So now he wants to have the past 15 years, and then he wants the past 20 years, and he can decide which number of years he wants. So for that, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to give him a parameter. That way I can really easily change the parameter. I can even do it in the Power BI service if the report is deployed. and then you'll see the past 10, past 15 or past 20 years. For that I go to manage parameters, I create a new parameter, param years, I give it the type, decimal number, and I give it the number, in this case initially 10 years. Okay, this parameter, I can use it anywhere I like, so I go to the monthly population, to the advanced editor, and here we have the -10, and instead of -10 I want to do minus the parameter years. You see here it still works, but what happens if I change it into 20? And I go over here, and you see immediately it's changed and it's getting the past 20 years. So everybody should be happy. This is one use case for parameters that's very handy, so that nobody has to dive into your M code and can screw things up. You give them a parameter, and with the parameter they can change the M code indirectly. Another use of parameter is if you want to build functions. And that's a very big topic, so let's take a look at it. First I want to show you something else, which we haven't covered yet. We have covered the records. A record is like an object in which you can have properties, but there also is a concept of list. So let's take a look at that. What's that? And for that I'll dive into the M code here. I can show you. This is what a list is like. A list is a collection or an array of objects or primitive data types. So it can be complex objects, or it can be simple things like this, 1, 2, 3 up till 10. You can also use a list range. Then you can say I want from 1 to 50. And if you look how it looks like here, this is a list of numbers. This is a list range, and I can really easily change it here. For example, I wanted 200, and then you get a list of numbers from 1 to 100. You can also use it with date times. You can use it for all kind of data types. Really handy. Then we have the concept of a record, which is like an object, a JSON object, if you know that. Here we have the start of the record and the end, and here we see all the fields that are inside the record. You can think about it as a row in a table, but it's not. It's not a row, it's an object, because it can also have sub-records, and these records can also have child records. So in that sense, it's not like a row, it's more like an object. And you can also have an array of records, a list of records. You could say this is a table, but it's not. It's a list of objects. Let's see how that looks like. So this is how a record looks like. You see it's visualized differently from a record, from a row, sorry, because all the fields are under each other. And here you see a list of records. And this is something we will see in a moment also. When you connect to a web service or you connect to a website, then you get exactly this structure. That's why I show you it here. So this is a list of records, and you can click next to the record and then you see all the fields. If you want to convert this into a table, because this is not something I can use in Power BI to create reports, it needs to be in a table format. For that, here we have the button to table, and then it's being converted into a proper table. Now it's not a table yet. Now I see a list of rows, and in the rows I have a column, and in that column is the record. And now I can expand, and I can choose which columns I want as columns in my table. And now it's a proper table. And that's also what I have here. Here I have the same table with the first name, last name, and I also have a birth date. Now what I want to do is I want to show you how you can create functions, and I want to create a function to calculate the age of each customer. So I want to have an age function that calculates the age as an input parameter. It takes the birth date and then it returns the age. So let's take a look. How can you define functions in M? Here I have a simple function, a scalar function with an x and a y parameter. I can put in, for example, 12 and 10, and I click invoke, and then it gives me the number 22. So this function adds these two numbers up. If you look at the advanced editor, we can see how it works. This is the syntax of a function. It looks a little bit strange. If you know C# or other programming language, this is called the lambda expression, the arrow syntax. These are the input parameters. So you have two round brackets, then one input parameter x defined as type number, y defined as type number, and the output type is also a number. Then you get the equal sign and the greater than sign, and then you get the real M code. In the let is again for the variable declarations and assigning, and the in is what you return. Okay, let's take a look if we can create a function for calculating the age. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to create a new query, but this is a blank query. It has no source, just new. Now I go over to the advanced editor, and now I can define my function parameters. So here I put in birth date as date. But now a strange thing happens. You see the capital D date is not the correct one. So the real types are at the lower cases. And for that you don't get IntelliSense, unfortunately. And what it returns is a number, as a number. So also again with the lower casing. And now I want to calculate something with the birth date. But hey, I already did the age calculation. So let's not do it over again here. I'm just gonna copy paste it. So this is my age function. I can name it also function age. Now I go over to my date time, and I'm gonna just steal the code. Why not? So let's take this one and this. Okay. Go over to this and then advanced editor, and I'm just gonna copy paste it in and see if I get it to work. Fingers crossed. So I need today. How do we get today again? Date time dot UTC now. I don't need yesterday or all these other things. The birth date, I already have it. That's the birth date parameter, so I can skip this one. I need to calculate the duration, so that's good, but I'm gonna take not the variable birth date, but the birth date parameter. So I take today, I subtract the birth date from it, and then that duration I divide it by 365.25 days, and then I get the age, and this is the variable that I want to return. So I can put it in the in, because the in was to return. Okay. And now I have an age function, and I can fill it in. I can just fill in a date. Let's say I was a little younger. Invoke. Now I'm 39. Perfect. This function I can use it like this, but it doesn't make any sense. I want to execute this function, invoke this function for each row in the table. So I go back to my table. So for each person, I want to use this as input parameter of the function. And that's really easy in M, because I can go to add column, and there's just a button for that. Invoke custom function. And it does exactly that. It invokes your custom env function. You can just click on the function age, and then you can supply here birth date, but I can choose it from one of the columns. That's what I want to do. And here I choose the column birth date, and then okay. And now it's just gonna calculate the age for me for each person. And if I go back to my advanced editor, now you can see how it works in M. Here we have the table.add column, and there we see the age, and it's gonna execute the function age for each record, and then it's gonna put as an input the birthday column. This is what I call a scalar value function. So a function that returns just one value. Now I want to take a look at what I call table valued functions. For that I'm going to use this example. Here I have web API, and in the URL I specify the year, for example 2019, and now I get all the races of Formula 1 in 2019. If I change it into 2020, like add all the races of 2020. What I want to do is create a function in which I can supply the parameter of the year, 2019, 2020, and this function will return all the races of that year. And I'm gonna call this function for a few years, like 2010 up till 2020. And all the results, I'm gonna concatenate them into one big table. That's what you can use functions for. But let's get started. I just take the URL, go over to Power Query, I do new source web. I can paste in the URL, okay. And I'll get the races of 2020. I can take the table, I can take the races, I can take the circuit and the location. I can expand the location, like just the country. And now I have a nice table. This is what I want to use. But now I want to make this year a variable using a parameter. So I can go to the advanced editor. And this is the one that I want to change. So I'm going to remove it and I'm going to concatenate a variable year. And I'm going to use that in the function. So the year is an input parameter for my function, is of type number. And then this is what I'm going to return. So the year comes in, it does its thing, it's concatenated into the URL, and then I get this table. Okay, let's try it out. Now it's officially a table valued function. So I can pass in a parameter, 2020, okay. And now it gives me an error. We've seen this before. What's the problem? Let's go back to the function. Advanced editor. I hear you say it. Year is of type number. This is of type string. So what do we need to do? I need to cast it again. Text.from. So give me a text from the numeric input year, and then I can concatenate it. Okay, let's try it again. I'm going to rename the function races, and now I can pass in the year 2020 invoke, and now I get the races of 2020. If I go back, pass in another year, 2019, I should get the races of 2019. So that's all nice. So now I have this function with this parameter, but it's useless again. I need to have a list of years and call the function for each year. So how can I do that? Let's look back at this one. In this example, I made a list of numbers, and here I made a range. So with these curly brackets, I can have like a range of years also. So let's try to use that. So I'm going to create a new, let's do it again. Let's create a new blank query. And this is, I'll call it years. Go to the advanced editor. So here I can pass in my years. For example, 2010, 2020. Okay. Now you get a list of years from 2010 up till 2020. Of course, we could also make these variable so that we could take the year of today, and then here we could take 10 years back, just like we did it in the previous example with the parameter years. But I just leave it as this for now. And now I want to call the function for each year in this list. So for that I use the same technique, add column. And now I cannot invoke the custom function. Why is that? Because these are table functions, and it's not a table. It looks like a table, but it is not, it's a list. And now I can transform the list into a table. Now it's a table, and I can rename this column to year, for example. And it should be a number, or else I'll get again problems with the casting. Now I can use add column, invoke custom function. I can choose my function races, and then I can pass in the year column, and okay. Now I get an error message about privacy. So now I need to determine what is the privacy level of this web API. So if you want to merge multiple queries together, they should have the same privacy level, so that you don't leak sensitive information by accident. So let's take it, it's public in this case, so it doesn't really matter. So now I get 21 tables, and now I can expand this, and I can choose all the columns that I need. So now I got the races of 11 years into one big table by repeatedly calling into this function. The last thing I want to show you is how you can do a cross join using M. For this I have the following sample. I have a sample with contracts, contract A, B, C, and they each have a start and end date. And I have a date table with all the dates that I need. And what I essentially want to do is do a cross join with those two tables, but only keep the dates that apply to this contract. So in this case, I only want the dates from 1st of February up to the 31st of May, and so forth. What it will look like is this. This is what I want. I want to see the contract with the dates from the start and the end date. And then I want to have, scroll down a little bit, then you see contract B. It starts at the 1st of January 2018. And it walks all the way up to the 31st of January 2018. This can be really handy to have these kind of tables. If you want this as a fact table and to do all kind of calculations with it. This is where M can be very handy also. What I do in this case, I create a function, dates between. So here I created a function with a start and end date. It returns a table. I take as a source the dates. So that's what I start with. And then I do a table.select rows to select only the dates that lie between the start and the end date. Or if the end date is null, I take all the dates because it's not ending anywhere. This function, I can call it from this table. So here I can choose add column, invoke custom function, dates between. I can choose a start date. I can choose an end date. Okay. Now I get a table again. I can expand the table and get the date column like this. And now I can remove the start and the end date if I want. And now I get exactly the overview that I wanted. So in this case you can also use a table valued function to do a cross join and generate your data. With that, we have come to the end of this session, unfortunately. Thank you very much for attending. You can find the slides and the samples at this link. Hopefully you have learned some new things about M and not afraid anymore to use the advanced editor. Have a nice day, have a nice conference.